Okay, guys, this is the first EKG lecture. This lecture is intended for people who know what the basic parts of an EKG are, people who know what step one, step two level of USMLE step one, USMLE step two level of EKGs are. They know how to recognize an SVT, they know how to recognize A.fib, they know all the basics of an EKG. But when they're in the hospital and someone hands them an EKG, other than figuring out rate, they can't really figure out much. So this is for all those people. I'm not going to go over the basics of an EKG, of what the strip is, yada yada yada. Learn that on your own. This is just for you. By the end of these 5 or 6 videos, the goal is for you to understand how to spot a left axis deviation, right axis deviation, left anterior fascicular block, left posterior fascicular block. Just know all the detailed intricacies of what an SVT is, what an SVT with aberrancy is, and just all the things that no one ever taught you in school. I'm going to teach it to you. So, but before we do that, we need to go over some EKG basics. By the end of this, you will understand no, you will not just look at lead 2, which is the most normal looking EKG to a bunch of people. You will look at actual leads and you will know what to spot. So this is the basics that no one ever teaches you. So this, I assume you will all know this, but I just put this here because this is where everyone starts from. I'm just going to skip over it. Okay, next thing, we're going to talk about duration, amplitude, and configuration. Duration is obviously the thing you see down here. Amplitude is in millivolts. This one box is I forgot actually. 0.1 is the one small box. This is 5, and this entire thing is 1 millivolt. Then we're not going to get into this detail. You honestly don't need to know this for at least on this. Okay, this is the detail box. So 2 big boxes, everyone is 0.1 millivolt, and then 0.2 seconds. 5 small boxes are 0.2 seconds. 1 very small box is 0.04. So this is honestly as much as you need to know. If you're really fancy, you need to know that an entire EKG strip is of 10 seconds, and every lead that we see, those small ones that we see, represents 2.5 seconds of the entire thing. And then we have one rhythm strip at the bottom, which is the entire 10 seconds. So we're capturing 10 seconds worth of information. That's all honestly you need to know. If you understand that this box is 0.2 seconds and a very small box is 0.04 seconds, you're honestly good to go. I'm just going to go over other basics that no one ever taught you. So moving forward. So remember that after the AV node, what's going to happen is there's going to be the bundle of His. You're going to have your right bundle branch is going to bundle off. You're going to have your left bundle branch. If they ask you how many fascicles are there, everyone says 2. The answer, there are 3 fascicles. There's the septal that everyone forgets about, left anterior fascicle and left posterior fascicle. And then these branch off to the Purkinje fibers, which supply the ventricles. Hopefully by the end of these 5 videos, what we want is for you to be able to spot a right bundle branch, spot a left anterior bundle branch, and spot a left posterior fascicular block. But there's a long way to go, and we need to know some basics first. Okay, so this is oh my god, sorry. This is a very need to know thing. The first downward deflection, we're talking about the ventricles, the QRS complex. The first downward deflection is always a Q wave, right? The next upward deflection after the first downward deflection is an R wave, and then the first downward deflection after an R wave is the S. So this is what we're used to seeing. So Q, R, S, that's normal. Now, sometimes what happens is you don't see a Q. You come, you go up, you go down. This is an RS. So you can you can pause the video here and read the text. So this is what it says. First downward deflection is a Q wave. First upward is an R wave. If you go down, then you go up, then you come down, then you go up again, then you go. So that's R prime. So you'll hear people referring to rabbit ears, R prime, RSR, yada, yada, yada. This is R prime. And what we're saying deflection, we're talking about deflection from baseline. So for example, if I had this AKG, so that's my Q wave, now I have an R wave. If I come just down here and go up, and again, and I haven't crossed baseline, so this is R prime. I won't say that there's an S wave. But again, if I had an EKG, I went down, up, I went down again, then I went up again, then I came back to baseline. So now I'd say I have a Q wave, I have an R wave, I have an S wave because you've crossed baseline here. Do you see the S wave? And then I have an R prime. So this is general terminology. You can pause the video and read this. You need to understand this terminology. And examples are on the next screen. So that hopefully will make everything. So this is examples of everything we've just talked about. First downward deflection Q, upward deflection R, next downward deflection S. This is R, S, R prime. This is R, S. Then this is QR. This is, and then okay. Then if there's only one downward deflection, that's QS, and that's just an R wave right there. Okay, so another thing I want you to know what the Q wave represents. The Q wave represents the depolarization of septum. So it's just this bottom thing. Whenever we're talking about Q wave, we're not going to be looking at the Q wave all too much, but just know that it represents the depolarization of the septum. Okay, this is all the segments. I added a slide here where I was talking about what each segment represents, but you guys probably already know that. P is atrial depolarization, QRS is ventricular depolarization, T is ventricular repolarization. As far as atrial repolarization, that occurs simultaneously with the QRS. It's hidden, so we don't see it. Again, just other things that I like to point out. QT interval represents everything that's going on in the ventricles. So from the time the ventricles depolarize to the time the ventricles repolarize, every funky business that's going on in the ventricle will happen in the QT interval. Everything else you guys probably already know. We don't need to memorize cutoffs at this point. Okay, now this is where the understanding that no one ever teaches you starts, right? And I'm going to teach it to you. So understand that obviously ECG leads are ECG electrodes. Whenever current, if you're an electrode and you're sitting in some like vantage point, if current is coming towards you, you'll be noting a positive deflection. That's what's written here on this slide. If you pause it and take a look at it, look at this is my electrode. Current is coming, the wave of depolarization, and depolarization is negative energy, electrons, yada yada yada. That's coming towards me. I will know a positive deflection. So this is the wave of depolarization right here. It's coming towards our electrode over here, which is like I'm circling in red, and our EKG is noting a positive deflection. We're going above baseline. So if current is coming towards you, if like electricity is coming towards you, you're going to note a positive deflection. So this is the start of the part that no one ever teaches you. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. If it's coming towards you, the lead is going to say, hey, like something's coming towards me. Okay. If it's going away from you, if you are a lead here and electricity is going away from you, you are going to know a negative deflection. You're going to be sad. That lead is going to be sad. So if it's coming towards you, positive deflection. If it's going away from you, negative deflection. That's what you need to know. So if you have a big ass heart right here, and suppose your lead is right, like right here, usually we say, like everyone knows I will assume the axis of the heart is like in this direction. Everyone kind of knows that. So this lead, we will expect this lead to be noting a more positive deflection because more electricity is coming towards the lead that's down there in like this weird red thing. So that is just a takeaway here. You need to know this. You need to know this. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Okay, and here's where things get tricky. This is the thing that no one ever teaches you. Look at this electrode right here that I'm circling in red right now. Electricity is coming towards it, so it should be like, hey, electricity is coming towards me. I will show a positive reflection. As soon as electricity is right here, like at this point, at this red line, the thing is now the electricity is going to start to go away from it. So when the electricity is going to start to go away from it, there should be a negative deflection, right? So this concept you have to like wrap around in your mind that up till here, there'll be a positive deflection on like the lead. As soon as electricity starts going away from this lead, our lead is right here in red, there's going to be a negative deflection. Now they've shown that this happens like over time. In technically, this will happen instantaneously, right? Because like instantly, like it's going to be coming, then it's going to be going. So they've shown like this kind of like acute angle or whatever. It's going to happen like tuck, right? It's going to go all the way down. So you're going to go up, you're going to go down, and then you're going to start coming, like it's going to be coming away. So just remember the direction. So the point I'm trying to make is if you look at this electrode kind of, we can say that its vantage point is perpendicular to the direction of current. So if current's going that way, you're sitting here, this is perpendicular, right? And if it's perpendicular, we say that it's going to come. So there's going to be like a positive deflection. At some point, it's going to start going away from you. There's going to be a negative deflection. So that is like the point. That is a take-home point. It's going to be elucidated on the other slides, but this is something that you really, really need to understand. That what these deflections mean. So if I tell you what this deflection means, you should say current is coming towards whatever electrode we're talking about, 1, 2, AVR. Then if I show you this part, you should say that, whoa, at this point, current is going away from this electrode. So this is something you really, really need to understand. Okay, so finally, this is just the same thing we did there again. So it says the final inscription of a depolarizing wave moving perpendicularly to an electrode is biphasic. That's the end of this sentence. The final inscription of a depolarizing wave, this is the wave moving perpendicularly towards and then away from this electrode is biphasic, right? That's what you want to know. And this is the biphasic EKG right here. This is something that you guys really need to understand. It's something that's not taught, but we really need to understand this. Okay. How does this all play out? Why did I go into this detail that like people don't talk about? The thing is, right, if your electrode, so we know this big ass arrow in the middle is the axis of the heart. Now, the thing is, obviously, this is the atrium and the axis is there. Now, if we have a lead that looks from this direction, right, generally the axis is going away. What is an axis? An axis is the mean electrical current, right? So generally, most of the electricity in the heart is going that way down. So this lead right here is gonna generally that's going away from this lead. It's gonna know a bigger downward deflection. This lead, if a lead was over here, it's gonna know a bigger upward deflection because electricity is coming towards it. This lead, if you kind of think about it, it's perpendicular. It's perpendicular to the mean axis of the heart. It's gonna know a biphasic. It's gonna first think that hey, electricity is coming towards me, and it's gonna be like, whoa, electricity just passed me. So this is the reason that I went into like, oh, this is what the deflections, like, yeah, the deflections represent yada yada yada, but this is what the deflections mean. So again, you can pause it, you can go back, take a look at this, but you really need to get this concept inside your head. Like it's useless. Everything that we're gonna go forward is useless without this idea. Okay, this is the thing that everyone sees in school. Unfortunately, you need to get very good at drawing this or like drawing this from your mind. Let me go back again. Up is minus 90, down is positive 90, 0 and 180. You just need to get good at this. All right, just like no, you gotta know this code. All right, I ain't gonna sugarcoat it. You gotta know this code. Okay. Now the reason I'm telling you like why you gotta know that code is if when I say lead one, you need to say, oh, lead one looks in this direction. This is the direction. This is where lead one is, right? If I say lead two, this is you have to say lead two is positive 60. You need to know this goal. And if I say lead three, that's positive 120. There are not too many of these guys. It's not that hard, but you have to memorize this. So lead one is 0. Lead one looks directly this way. So if you're looking on I kind of do it on my body. So this is me. I think that this is my heart. Like you guys might see a flip, but put your hand on your heart. And then 0 is again just that way. Lead two is a little bit that way. And AVL, just lead three. Look at where lead three is for you. But you gotta know this code, where what lead one is, what lead two is, and what lead three is, and like the degrees that it's looking at. I would suggest drawing it. I've drawn it on the next slide. So this is AVL, AVR, AVF. Again, this is kind of easy to memorize. When this all comes together in the end, you will realize that it's made sense. Everyone memorizes that like, oh, inferior wall STEMI 2, 3, AVF. This is gonna make all of it make sense. So you just need to practice drawing like this next diagram that I'm gonna put up. So this is the diagram you need to practice making. You need to practice this a lot. You need to draw this circle. You need to write minus 90 at the top, positive 90 at the bottom, lead 2 here, lead 3 here, 1 AVL here, and then AVR over here. Now, if you kind of think about it, you've been doing this all along. If you've studied for step 1, step 2, you know that lateral wall infarcts are 1 in AVL. You've known to look at that. If we've said that if you look at inferior wall infarcts, you've been saying 2, 3 AVF. That's what you're doing. You're looking at the bottom of the heart, and no one really gives a crap about AVR, but AVR is over there. So you've kind of already been doing this, but you didn't know that you were doing it. So this kind of puts it into perspective for you that lateral wall 1 AVL, inferior wall 2, 3 AVF, and then no one gives a crap about AVR. Okay. So this is what you've been doing in your mind, right? So this is the stuff that you've been doing in your mind. This hopefully you have to go back, you have to memorize a circle, and you have to know where these leads are in your mind, right? When you're drawing them all like a patient in your head, you need to know which direction these leads are looking at. Because if you know which direction they're from, you will know whether to expect current coming towards them or current going away from them, like electricity. So you really need to know this, guys. Okay. So what about all V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6? What's good is this is the easiest one to memorize. V1, if you think about it, looks straight down, right? So straight down, if you remember from the thing is, and I've forgotten, it's positive 90, right? And this is V6 is 0 degrees, right? So kind of like you can kind of eyeball these ones. So V1 is straight down, V6 is straight across. So V1 is basically kind of equivalent to AVF. It's not really because they're frontal planes and lateral planes and yada yada and horizontal. Don't get into that, but this is the angle that V1 looks at the heart from. All right. We're not going to get into what the difference is. That's too like advanced for this video. Like, why is V1, like, why do you need a V1 and an AVF then? But they're different planes that we're looking at the heart, and just, we're not going to get into that, but just memorize that V1, V2, V3, V4, this is the direction that the precordial leads are looking at the heart from. Okay, next. So this is all the baseline knowledge that you need moving forward. But I'm not going to end the video here. I'm just going to add some other stuff, some actionable information. Now that you know kind of what a deflection means and you kind of know where 2, 3 AVF are, I thought I'd add something that like a positive take, like an actual actionable takeaway. So first of all, obviously current is moving this direction. That's the sinus node, and it's going towards generally where lead 2 is, which is kind of right here, the positive 60. If I were to tell you now, we're talking about the P wave for now. So P wave, sinus node is going to fire, and current is going to move towards here, where lead 2 is, where positive 60 is, positive 60 degrees is. So we said that AVR is here, right? AVR lies at minus 150. If you remember, if you're like recalling, AVR lies at minus 150. That's where the electrode is placed. If the electrode is placed there and the mean current is going down that way, that electrode should register a negative deflection, right? That's what we've been talking about this entire time. So if you always look at the P wave in AVR, you will notice that the P wave in AVR is negative, because it's a negative deflection, because AVR is like sitting at the sinus node, and it's sitting at the sinus node like area, and it's seeing that current is going away from me. So it's registering a negative deflection. Similarly, if I were to tell you that if you looked in lead 2, you would see a purely upright P wave. That would be expected because lead 2 is looking at the area where the P wave is coming. If you looked at lead 1, that would also kind of give you an upright P wave, because you're kind of in this direction. So any lead, wait, let me clear this. Any lead where I'm marking with green is, it's not green. Any lead where I'm marking with green will be giving you like a positive P wave. That's what you're going to expect, because the electricity is coming towards these leads. Any lead that's up here, and kind of the only lead that you guys will notice that's up here is AVR, even in the diagram that we drew previously, we'll be noting a negative P wave. That's what we should expect. If the P wave is positive in AVR, that means something is really wrong, right? That means your electrodes are wrong, or there's something really wrong with the heart. And the thing I want to point out to you, which brings it all together, is look at what's going to be happening in AVF and look at what's going to be happening in lead 3. In these leads, again, the current is going in this direction. The P wave, for now, the P wave, like electricity from the sinus node, is going in that direction. These leads are set like somewhat perpendicular. I will draw with like white. They're somewhat perpendicular to the mean current that's going. So what's going to happen is, well, when the current is coming, the lead 3 is going to, like the third lead is going to think, hey, it's coming towards me. So it's going to show a positive deflection, which is what we see here. As soon as it crosses like here, it starts here, like after this line here, the lead 3 is going to be like, hey, it's now going away from me. And there's going to be a negative deflection. We're going to start in this negative deflection. So remember, if you have a perpendicular vantage point to the direction of a current, if the electrode is perpendicularly placed to the direction of the current, it's going to show a biphasic deviation. So that's the reason I put this up here. So now you know generally in the back of your mind that, hey, lead 1, lead 2, I should be expecting a positive P wave. AVR, it should always be negative. And lead 3 can be biphasic. Okay, like that's just something you know in the back of your head now. Okay, similarly, if we do the same thing, same logic applies. V6, look at it. Current is coming more towards V6, positive. So everything in red, kind of like here, there should be a positive P wave. V1, again, if you kind of think about it, it's perpendicular to like the electricity that's current. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but you guys really need to understand like this concept that V1 is perpendicular to the direction of current. V1 will show a biphasic P wave. Okay. Oh man, I didn't have to clear the screen. Okay. So this is just, okay. Now I told you that, hey, like look for the biphasic P wave in lead 3, you know, like, oh, that like, cause you're perpendicular to the current. That's not always true. Generally what's always true is that AVR's P wave will be negative, because generally the current is moving that way. Some people's heart, like now if your heart's like this, like if your heart is like this in the first picture, then you notice that lead 3 is perpendicular to this thing, and you're going to have a biphasic lead, like lead 3, like a p wave in lead 3. But what if your heart's like lying flat like this? Now if you notice, lead 3 ain't perpendicular to the mean electrical current, which is this way. So you're not going to have a biphasic p wave in lead 3. So just know that like the only things that you can take for granted is that p wave will be negative in AVR and should be on the more positive side in like lead 2, like those leads over there. So don't go looking for the biphasic p wave. That's what I'm saying. You just need to know that as a concept that exists. Generally, like you're not going to determine the axis by looking, hey, where is it biphasic, and then like being like, oh, if it's biphasic here, that means I'm 90 degrees away from like where the mean axis is, and you're reasoning out. You're not going to do that. You're just going to see that, hey, it's negative in AVR, it's positive in lead 2, that means it's going that way, like negative up there, positive. You're not going to be looking at, hey, where is it biphasic? So that's just not a good practice either. But it's just a cool thing to know, like why things become biphasic. That's why I added that, and that's just a concept you need to have. You're not going to be looking for biphasic waves. You're generally going to be looking for more positive or more negative, like deflections. Okay. Remember initially on the third or fourth slide, if you were paying attention, we said that Q waves represent septal depolarization. So again, you're going to come down here. The first Q wave, the Q wave is the first initial negative at the start of the QRS. This I kind of messed up the drawing here, but that's the Q wave. That's the first initial negative. That represents septal depolarization. That's what's in here on the slide. You can read it and pause it if you want. This is the same thing again. This is just going to become very relevant in another slide. That's why I added here. Again, you can pause it. Make sure you know this code, guys. Okay. Now think about it this way. Again, AVR, we know that the P wave should be negative. I've already talked about that. But the mean electrical current of the heart is also going away from AVR. So you will notice that majority of the QRS will be negative. And at this point, there is no Q wave because like we're up here, septal depolarization happens there. So like there's generally no Q wave in AVR, and there's just there's a negative P wave, and then there's a big ass negative QS wave. That's kind of what we call it. But so generally representing that, hey, like a lot of electricity, the AVR like lead is saying, hey, a lot of electricity is just going away from me. That's normal. That's what we expect. Similarly, if we look at this, if we look at lead 1, we know that there should be a P wave, should be upright in lead V1. It should be upright in lead 2 because, hey, it's receiving like the P wave. It's the electricity is coming towards it. And then we know that the QRS should also be more upright in these leads. So we should have like a positive deflection, like the ventricle should show a really big QRS. That's what we expect. Now, the reason that this slide is up here is we're going to talk a little bit about the Q wave. If you think about it, remember I said in the previous slide, if I show you, previous slide, if I go back, guys. Okay, I can't go back. Whatever. In the previous slide, right? We said that remember the septal, like the septal fascicle kind of goes that way. It kind of comes off like on the side. So if you think about it, if it's going on the side there, the electricity that's going into the septal, like the septal fascicle, is going that way. And lead 1 is here looking here. So lead 1 is going to think that, hey, for a while, I just noticed some electricity go away from me. And if that electricity went away from me, that's a negative deflection. So lead 1 will show a negative deflection of the Q of the QRS. Similarly, V6 is up here, V5 is up here, V4 is up here. All of those guys might see a negative deflection of the Q wave because the septal fascicle goes off that way. I can't go back in the slide for some reason. You can go back and see how it's oriented. So this is the reason that this is up here. As opposed to lead V2, which is positive 60, which is down here, there also can be a Q wave in lead V2. Let me clean up the screen. Because this is going kind of this way, and V2 is sitting here, lead 2 is sitting here. But it's not as much. Look, lead 1 is sitting right here. It is very sensitive to any electricity that's going directly away from it. So it will pick up the Q wave really well. Lead 2, maybe not so much. You might see one, you might not see one. Like, it's up to you. But that's the reason I put this here. This is where the understanding of where electricity is coming towards me, going away from me, and the deflection it will cause. That first concept you really need to know. And second, of where that lead is oriented in space. This is what's going to matter a lot. So that's the reason I've added this. So moving on. right, let me clear the screen. Okay, so moving on. Similar idea is going to apply for like, now we're going to talk about the strength of the QRS complexes. Look at V6. All the electricity is kind of coming towards V6. So V6 should have a really tall R wave. And is any electricity going away from V6? Not really. All of the electricity is coming towards V6. So here, what should we expect? Well, V6 is kind of where that lead one was. So V6 will first it'll receive a positive P wave. So if we're talking about V6, then the septal fascicle will like kind of like some electricity will go off there, and V6 is very sensitive to that. So V6 will know like, hey, some electricity just went away from me, and then it will receive the entire electrical signal for the ventricular depolarization, and there should be a huge R wave. Now, does any electricity go like in the opposite direction away from V6? Generally, like, yes, but the mean vector is towards V6. So V6 will think this is what V6 will look like: a positive P, a Q wave, a big R wave, and no S wave. And that's what we see right here. Similarly, I'm going to clear it up. And similarly, V5 will be kind of similar to V6. V4 will be a little less similar. But as you can see, as we're going from V6 to V5 to V4 to V3, now let's look at what's happening in V3. V3, remember we said that when you are perpendicular to to the like direction of flow of current, and your lead is perpendicular to it, you will have a biphasic wave. So it doesn't look like it in this picture, but V3 is kind of perpendicular to the mean electrical current in this case. So if you notice, V3 will have a biphasic QRS. So you will have like a Q, or you may not have a Q. You'll have an R wave, then you'll have an S wave. So what that R wave is showing that, hey, V3 is initially thinking that current's coming towards me, and that what that S wave is showing is then V3 is thinking, the electrode is thinking that, hey, current is going away from me. So you'll notice that V6, because of where it's placed in like space, it's going to have the tallest R wave. V5 is going to be a little smaller. V4, you're going to have a little S wave coming in. V3, you're now perpendicular to it. You should have an equal R, like the height of the R should be equal to the height of the S. V2, at this point, more current. If you think about where V2 is sitting, more current is going kind of away from V2. V2 is like, hey, I got like this much current, and now more current is going away from me in that direction. The S wave is bigger. And V1 just thinks that, hey, all the current is going away from me. The S wave is huge. So what we're seeing here is we call this like the R wave progression. The R wave is really small in V1 and really large in V6. The S wave is really big in V1 and really small in V6. This is like the progression of the R wave. And we say that V3 is biphasic. So again, this speaks back to the initial concept that we just had. So this is something you need to know. Like, this progression is something that we'll be looking at in the future and thinking like, hey, is our ECG normal? Okay, this is just wrapping up points. Okay, what repolarization? We said that when electricity comes towards an electrode, there is a positive deflection. When electricity goes away from an electrode, there's a negative deflection. If you're V6 right here, electricity came towards you, you said, hey, this is a big R wave. Repolarization is electricity going away from you. Like, it's the opposite of depolarization. So kind of when there's repolarization happening, just think of electricity going away from you. So you will again, this is kind of tricky in the sense that electricity is not really going away from you. If it's going away from you, hey, the lead should be like, hey, there should be a negative deflection. That's what V6 should think. But repolarization is a little bit funky because like the charges are reversed. So for all intents and purposes, electricity is going away from you, but there's a positive wave. This is not entirely correct the way I've explained it, but just at least the takeaway, if you want to take a takeaway, remember that wherever R waves are positive, T waves should be positive. And wherever like there's a deep negative, T waves should be negative. Again, there are reasons for this. I just did a really bad job of explaining it. But repolarization, how the electrode responds to repolarizations is the opposite to how the electrode responds to depolarizations. And that is a really weird thing to get your mind around. I don't have my mind around it. But remember, wherever the R wave, I'm running out of time, so this video ends here. I wanted to show you this ECG. You can pause and take a look at this ECG. Everything that we've learned is here. AVR, the P wave's negative, V3, like V2, things are biphasic. I'm running out of time on my screen recording thing, but everything we've learned is in this ECG here. If you go back in time and look at it, hopefully you understand it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.